everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the first two issues of John Pham's one-man anthology, EPOXY. I've done a video about a couple of the more recent issues of EPOXY a while back, and also John's release from Fantagraphics, J&K, both of which have the risograph feel. All three of those pieces have like tip-ins and inserts and all these like cool little production tricks going on. So it was really interesting to see in these early issues. And I guess I must have ordered these from John when I ordered the other issues of EPOXY. They showed up now. I don't even remember ordering them. And I don't remember thinking I wasn't getting stuff when I got the other ones, but I'm very happy that they showed up. But it's really interesting because these are quite different products. I mean, you can tell from one to the other that this is now headed towards the risograph, more couture production, and this is like glossier, more like Image Comics type of looking vibe to it. I'd be really curious to get a hold of the epoxies that I'm missing that kind of bridge the gap between this and the later issues, because John's obviously evolved as an artist quite a bit between issue 1 and his most recent issue, and I'd really like to be able to track that progress more, but they're pretty hard to get a hold of. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to. But anyways, we'll take a look at these first two issues here. The first issue has 3 different stories in it, 2 of which continue in issue 2. This one is also showing some of John's interest in like production trickery with a fold-out cover on the other side, as it's a flip book and one of the stories is on the other side. So I just wanted to give a look at the art and talk about the stories a little bit. This first story is called Shiva. It's a sci-fi. The art to me is reminiscent of early stuff by Brandon Graham, as well as a mixture of like some Paul Pope mark making and Paul Pope's type of way of drawing cities and things like that. But the story centers around a character, Nico, who is a robot. Nico owes some money to this dragon character. But the whole time in the captions, while this action sequence is going on, Nico is having this conversation about people not being content, people wishing that they were something other than what they are now. And Nico's here saying, sometimes I wish I were a girl, and having this conversation just about, I don't know, not even gender norms or anything, but just his own kind of feeling like he doesn't quite fit. And as a robot, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of puns in this one as well. Like here you have a dragon, the character's name is actually Su, T-S-U, like Sun Tzu, but the dragon just kind of says a boy named Su here, and they make a joke about that. And then the dragon also says, however, if I had a nickel for every dollar I've loaned out, and is playing a word game with the robot's name there. So that also kind of reminded me of Brandon's early stuff. Something about the drawing as well reminds me of like the King City when Brandon was working in black and white, the puns and stuff. So this is like an interesting action sequence with this more thoughtful like inner monologue running on top of it, and it definitely sets up the world that will be explored in later segments of this. Then the next story in here is called Modesto, which really caught my interest because obviously I'm a Modesto boy, born in Sacramento, but raised in Modesto most of my life. And John Pham, it says, is from Van Nuys, California. So as a Californian is probably aware of Modesto, at least. John Pham's obviously Vietnamese, and it seems like this story centers around a Vietnamese family in this town, Modesto. There's nothing in here that confirms it's actually Modesto, California, but there is a large Vietnamese population in Modesto. So it's quite possible that John Pham has relatives or something in Modesto. You're getting introduced in this story to the main character, Olive. She's talking to her uncle Harold on the phone, and they're reminiscing. You also go on to meet a couple of Olive's friends. The one thing that, if this is about Modesto, California, that I thought was a really kind of funny little commentary is it says the only local band Modesto's got is a bunch of kids who call themselves the Salty Cheeks, which, if this is supposed to be Modesto, California, then John hasn't spent enough time there, because if this was released in 2000, 2000, 2001. When I was in high school from 94 to 99, I was in a band. We had a really kind of pumping local scene. The band Granddaddy blew up to be quite popular worldwide, I think. More recently, metal band Death Haven. They say they're from San Francisco, but a couple of the members were from Modesto and started Modesto. So Modesto actually had at least a surprisingly good music scene. So I had to get kind of a laugh out of this. And in 2000s, there was a pretty good scene as well. So if this is supposed to be Modesto, California, the way it's drawn is quite accurate. The beat up, dry looking lawns and the very suburban houses and stuff. It's definitely the impression you would get of Modesto if you were coming from Southern California. My uncle, who was from Anaheim, LA, always said Modesto was like 2 cows and a bus stop. I mean, it's a town of like 300 some odd thousand people. So now that I'm in Alabama, where that's probably bigger than the biggest town here, or as large as the biggest town, it's kind of laughable that my hometown was seen as a small town. But in California context, it makes sense. So really curious about this story. I was really curious to see where it goes. And I've always actually wanted to do a book called Modesto that's about like a cast of characters, kind of an ensemble thing. I'll never do it because I would never have the time. But it was like, oh, someone's doing a Modesto story, and I haven't quite figured out if it's supposed to be Modesto, California, or not. So that one's interesting. You're basically kind of just getting to know the characters in this one, and that we'll follow up with them later in issue 2. Then this is a flip book, so this is kind of a premonition of what John Pham does with like the inserts and the interest in just like different binding and production techniques in later books. So you have this nice fold out cover here, you have the flip book, and then you get this story Elephantine, which is about a one-armed boxer who's kind of on the very, very underground bare-knuckle boxing scene, and like the people surrounding him and betting on him and whatnot. This story you can see on this first page with these big, on the second page as well, these big like city scenes and kind of the brushwork, the way this looks right here. This is where I'm really seeing the Paul Pope influence. I think this was my favorite story in the book because it was the most obvious, like what the story was about right out the gate. You know, by page 2, you know, this is about this one-arm boxer guy who's kind of like haggard at the end of his, well, actually it seems like his career's growing even though he's haggard, but he can really take a beating is like his biggest thing, and then he'll come back, and even though he's one-armed, you know, he'll still win. I thought one of the most interesting observations in here is there's a part where they say that they don't really know what to do with him in terms of weight class because he weighs a lot less because of the missing arm. So that puts him, but if he had his arm, he would be in a much larger weight class. So he's moving up a couple weight classes or down a couple weight classes just by losing the arm, but having the strength of a larger weight class. So I thought that was interesting. You know, someone who's interested in martial arts and mixed martial arts, combat sports. That's an interesting, keen observation, I think, there. And by the end of it here, you're getting a sense of like he's going to be coming in and fighting someone even like more difficult, and that really set me up for wanting to read more of that story. That's my favorite one so far. And then here you get just like this centerpiece that shows the fold, like this is the Elephantine and this is the Modesto. Then in issue 2, we pick up with those two stories of Elephantine and Modesto. We start with the Modesto one right back here. You'll see that now this is Pham all going towards risograph, realizing he can work with spot colors, playing with the unique color process of the risograph, which is something he expands on quite a bit. It's really interesting, though. Like I said, I would like to see the things that bridge the gap here, because this stylistically is quite different from the more cartoony style that he's employing in any of his work that I was familiar with before this. Again, this one you get introduced more to Olive's family. She has a big Vietnamese family that's coming together for a dinner, and her friends Alice and Tamara are coming over, talking to the uncles, getting to know the people. And this one seems to be more focused and tight. The first story was more about Olive coming up with an idea to shoot a movie, which isn't really addressed, a basketball movie, which isn't really addressed at all in this episode. So it seems like the story is taking a swerve as well, like almost John's ideas about what he wants to write about are changing. I'm not sure because I don't know if issue 3 has the basketball filming or whatnot, but I really like the family dynamics and stuff that are represented in here. Just it's a way of like peeking into another culture that's very natural feeling. It doesn't feel like it's saying something about representation. It just is representing, which is great. And here they do have a bit that says they're talking about someone who's going to be coming, someone that spent this character spent time with in Camp Pendleton. Says he was a very nice guy. I hear, where does he live now? And this character says California, and then they say, wow, that's far away. So then that makes me think that we're not operating in Modesto, California. But in this next page, the characters are talking about going to Maryland for school, or at least somewhere out in the East Coast. And then this character, Alice, says, Tamara, that's so far away. So suggesting out on the East Coast, and that's so far away. I'm not really sure then where this is supposed to be set. I doubt that bothers anyone but me, because I'm from Modesto and I'm wanting to see if this story is in Modesto. But there's a bit of conflicting information there. Does, like I said, wouldn't really matter to anyone else but me. Then you get this kind of in-between page again, where you have the Modesto story here and the Elephantine story here, and it's a flip book again. But this, you can see the characters wearing a THB shirt. So a really like clear shout out to the influence of Paul Pope. I didn't see anything that was a super clear shout out to the influence of Brandon, but knowing that Brandon and Paul Pope and those guys were kind of all loosely associated at the time, it wouldn't surprise me. So we come back to Elephantine, we come back to the one-armed boxer, learn more about him, and just showing off some of the art here, which is, like I said, wildly different from the very stripped-down, cartoony, almost like vector graphic look of some of the stuff in the later Epoxy issues. Some really beautiful brushwork, some really intense, dynamic fight scenes here. I like the big brushy strokes representing the muscles. It's nice to have it all in this green, just adds a little something extra to it. But again, those almost abstract framing of buildings and stuff that you'll see sometimes in Paul Pope's work, along with, a development of a pretty unique style as well. This isn't something you'd see in Paul Pope at all. This is coming from a lot of different places and coming together to be its own unique thing. So really enjoyed these, and like I said earlier, would really, really like to see how it moves from this to what I've seen, because already between this issue where you have this super glossy, like mainstream superhero comics type of approach, to this where playing with like a photograph, it looks like, and playing with production techniques or a 3D rendered model or something, the photograph of a sculpture, I'm not sure. A huge jump between two issues, and I would love to see what the jump is between issue 2 and issue 3, and then 3 and 4, up until I think number 6 or 7 is what's out now. So really glad I got these. I don't remember ordering them. I thanked John on Instagram, and he just said, sorry it took so long to get them to you. So I don't think he sent them along free, because I've done reviews before, which is what I thought at first. So I must have ordered it, and he must have just taken a long time to get them to me. But really happy to get them, and I will continue looking around to see if I can find reasonably priced versions of the ones I'm missing. Or if people can tell me, just, tell me at what point does he kind of switch over, or is he constantly evolving? He is an artist I'm really, really curious about. So anyone who knows more, I'd love to hear it. Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.